Hey friends! Today we're going on an amazing journey to find out how people lived, what they ate, and what their daily lives were like in the past. But before we dive into the video, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to comment below to tell us where you're watching from. Alright friends, let's hop into our time machine and travel back to the medieval world. When we talk about the medieval period, we usually mean the time between the 5th and the 15th century, commonly known in Europe as the Middle Ages. It was the age of kings, knights, castles, and empires. Today, when we think of food, especially fast food like pizza, burgers, or hot dogs, we immediately connect it with modern lifestyle and urban culture. But in the medieval period, food and eating habits were completely different from what we know today. Food in the Middle Ages was not only about survival, it was also about status and class. The poor, mostly peasants and farmers, lived on simple diets that included coarse bread, grains, pulses, and a few seasonal vegetables. On the other hand, the wealthy lords, nobles, and kings enjoyed a wide variety of meats, exotic dishes, and rare spices imported from distant lands. What people ate clearly reflected the social hierarchy of the time. Cooking in the medieval world was also very different. There were no gas stoves, no electric ovens, and certainly no refrigerators. Meals were prepared over open fires, in clay ovens, or in large iron cauldrons. Herbs and spices shaped the flavor of food, while methods like drying, salting, and pickling were used to preserve it for long periods. Interestingly, if we compare modern fast food culture with medieval food traditions, we can find certain parallels. While today's pizza, burger, and hot dog are quick meals that people eat on the go, medieval society had its own versions of fast food. Meat pies, stuffed breads, and flatbreads with toppings were portable and easy to eat, much like the fast foods we consume today. This script will explore medieval food in detail, from the daily meals of peasants to the extravagant feasts of royalty, from common ingredients to cooking styles, from everyday drinks to early versions of fast food. By the end, we will see how medieval food habits shaped the way people ate, and how those traditions eventually evolved into what we now recognize as modern fast food. In medieval society, daily life revolved around survival, work, and community. Food was at the heart of this routine, but what people ate depended heavily on their social class, location, and the availability of resources. Unlike today, where we can walk into a restaurant or order fast food within minutes, food in the Middle Ages required time, labor, and careful planning. For the peasants and common folk, food was simple, repetitive, and mostly plant-based. Bread was the staple of their diet, often made from rye, barley, or oats rather than the fine white wheat that only the rich could afford. Alongside bread, they consumed pottages, thick soups or stews made of vegetables, grains, and sometimes beans or peas. Meat was rare for them, usually reserved for special occasions, though they might sometimes get pork, chicken, or fish if they were lucky. For the nobility and the wealthy, food was not just about nutrition, it was about prestige and display. Meals were designed to impress. Rich households enjoyed a wide variety of meats such as venison, rabbit, swan, and boar. Spices like pepper, cinnamon, and saffron were imported from Asia and were extremely expensive, but nobles used them lavishly to show off their wealth. Their tables were also filled with fresh fruits, nuts, and elaborate pastries. One striking difference between classes was the quality of bread. While peasants ate coarse, dark loaves made from mixed grains, nobles ate soft, fine, white bread. In many ways, bread itself became a symbol of status in medieval society. Another important aspect of food culture was religion. The medieval Christian Church imposed strict rules about fasting and abstinence. On many days of the year, especially during Lent, people were forbidden to eat meat. Instead, fish, eggs, and dairy products became the main sources of protein. This religious influence shaped not just diets but also trade, as salted and dried fish became a common commodity. Meals were usually eaten twice a day. The first main meal, often taken around late morning, was called dinner, while the evening meal, lighter than the first, was called supper. Breakfast was uncommon among adults but sometimes eaten by children, the sick, or laborers who needed extra energy. Overall, daily life and food culture in the Middle Ages reflected the harsh realities of survival for the poor and the indulgent luxuries of the wealthy. Food was more than sustenance. It was a marker of identity, religion, and social standing. The rhythm of meals in the medieval world was very different from today's three-meal routine filled with snacks and fast food. Instead, people generally ate two main meals a day, with breakfast being rare and often considered unnecessary for adults unless they were doing heavy labor. Each meal carried its own social and cultural significance, and what was served varied greatly between the poor and the wealthy. Breakfast in the Middle Ages was not the standard meal it is today. For most adults, especially in wealthier classes, breakfast was either skipped or kept extremely light, since eating too early was often seen as a sign of gluttony. However, laborers, farmers, and children often ate something small in the morning. A typical peasant's breakfast might consist of coarse bread with ale or watered-down wine. In some cases, people had pottage, a thick soup or stew, left over from the previous night. The nobility, if they had breakfast, might include bread, cheese, or cold meat, sometimes even sweetened wine or ale. Breakfast was more practical than ceremonial. It gave energy for work but was never considered a main social meal. Lunch, dinner, main meal of the day. What we call lunch today was the largest meal of the day in the medieval era, usually eaten around late morning or midday. This was referred to as dinner. For peasants, dinner often consisted of pottage, coarse bread, and occasionally cheese or onions. Meat was rare, though sometimes pork or bacon could be part of the meal. For nobles, dinner was a grand event. Multiple courses were served, starting with soups or stews, followed by roasted meats, pies, fish, and vegetables. Exotic spices flavored many of these dishes, and fruits or sweet pastries might follow. Wealthy households also used dinner as a chance to show off their hospitality and status by inviting guests to the table. Dinner for the rich often involved elaborate ceremonies, servants presenting dishes in order, musicians playing, and meals being eaten with a sense of theater. Supper, evening meal. Supper was eaten in the evening, usually lighter than dinner. For peasants, this might mean leftover pottage or bread with ale. For nobles, supper could still be substantial, though not as lavish as dinner. It might include cold meats, fish, or small pies, sometimes accompanied by fruits and desserts. The timing of supper depended on the season. In summer, when daylight lasted longer, people ate later, while in winter supper was taken earlier, often before nightfall. Festive meals on feast days or special occasions. The standard meal schedule could be broken with people indulging in extra food or special dishes. Nobles might eat roasted swan, peacock, or even exotic imported foods, while peasants would enjoy more meat and ale than usual. In summary, the daily meal structure of the Middle Ages reflected practicality, religion, and class. Peasants ate to survive and gain enough strength for labor, while nobles transformed meals into spectacles of wealth and culture. Common ingredients in medieval food. Medieval food was built around a range of ingredients, many of which are still familiar today. though their usage and availability varied widely between social classes. Understanding these ingredients helps us grasp what people ate daily and how they made their meals flavorful, nutritious, and sometimes long-lasting. Grains and bread. Grains were the cornerstone of medieval diets. Bread was the most common staple, and different types reflected wealth and status. Rye, barley, and oats, used by peasants to make coarse, dark bread that was dense and filling. Wheat, reserved mostly for the wealthy, producing soft white bread considered a luxury. Other grains. Corn was not common in Europe until after the 15th century, but millet and spelt were also used. Bread wasn't just a food, it often served as a plate or utensil. Large, stale loaves called trencher bread were cut into slabs and used to hold or scoop up food before being eaten or given to animals. Vegetables and legumes. Vegetables were common among peasants, but less celebrated by the wealthy, who preferred meat. Popular medieval vegetables included onions, leeks, garlic and cabbage, turnips, carrots and parsnips, peas and beans, which provided protein for the poor. Vegetables were usually cooked in stews or pottages. Salads existed but were simple, often dressed with vinegar or herbs. Meat and fish. Meat consumption highlighted social status. Peasants rarely ate meat, sometimes having pork, chicken, or rabbit. Hunting rights were restricted, so wild game was usually reserved for the nobility. Nobility consumed beef, venison, boar, swan, peacock, and game birds. Meat was often roasted, boiled, or turned into pies. Fish was also important, especially for foreigners. Religious fasting days when meat was forbidden. Salted, dried, or smoked fish allowed for longer storage and easier transport. Common types included herring. Drinks in the medieval period. Drinks in the medieval era were as important as food and reflected both social class and available resources. Clean water was not always accessible, so people often turned to fermented or brewed beverages that were safer to drink. Ale and beer. Ale was the most common drink for peasants and workers. It was a low-alcohol beverage made from fermented grains, usually barley, and provided both hydration and calories. Beer, slightly stronger than ale, was also popular and often flavored with herbs instead of hops in the earlier Middle Ages. These drinks were consumed throughout the day, even by children, as they were considered safer than water. Wine was mostly consumed by the wealthy, though it became more widespread in southern Europe due to easier access to vineyards. Red and white wines were used for drinking, cooking, and medicinal purposes. In northern regions, where grapes were scarce, wine was imported and considered a luxury. Mead, made by fermenting honey with water, was another popular drink among both peasants and nobles. It could be sweet or strong, and was often consumed during feasts and celebrations. Milk and dairy drinks. Milk was consumed mostly by peasants, often fresh or fermented into buttermilk or yogurt-like drinks. Butter and cheese were more common as food than as a beverage, but dairy played an essential role in the diet. Herbal infusions and water. Herbal teas made from mint, rosemary, or sage were consumed for flavor and medicinal purposes. Water was consumed when available, but it was often unsafe due to contamination. Boiling water into soups or brewing it into ale or beer was a practical way to ensure it was safe. Seasonal and special beverages. During festivals, special beverages such as spiced wine, mulled ale, or fruit punches were served, often sweetened with honey. These drinks added a sense of celebration and were a symbol of wealth when spices or imported ingredients were used. Overall, medieval drinks were closely tied to health, safety, and social status. Fermented beverages dominated daily life because they were safer than water, and the wealthy could enjoy a wider variety of options, including imported wines and spiced drinks. Medieval fast food. Portable and quick meals. While modern fast food like pizza, burgers, and hot dogs didn't exist in the medieval period, people still had portable and quick meals designed for convenience, travel, or labor. These foods served a similar purpose to today's fast food. They were easy to carry, required little preparation while eating, and provided immediate energy. Meat pies and pasties. Meat pies were one of the earliest forms of fast food. These pies were made by encasing meat, vegetables, and sometimes cheese in a pastry shell. The crust acted as a container and could be eaten along with the filling. Nobles enjoyed elaborate pies with spices, while simpler versions were eaten by peasants. Cornish pasties, originally from England, are a direct descendant of these medieval portable pies. Flatbreads and toppings. Flatbreads topped with ingredients like cheese, herbs, or minced meat were another handheld option. Unlike modern pizza, these were simpler but provided a complete, ready-to-eat meal for workers, travelers, or soldiers. Pottages in portable form. Thick stews or pottages could also function as quick meals. They were often carried in small containers or trenchers of bread. Travelers, soldiers, and peasants on the move would eat from these portable pottages, making them an early form of meal to go. Dried and salted foods. Dried fruits, nuts, and salted meats were essential for long journeys. Sailors, soldiers, and merchants relied on these items as they didn't spoil easily. Salted pork, jerky, and dried fish were common, much like modern packaged snacks that provide energy without refrigeration. Street vendors in markets. Although not as organized as today's fast food chains, medieval towns had markets where simple, ready-to-eat foods were sold. Vendors offered bread, cheese, pies, and sometimes roasted meats. These stalls were popular with townspeople who needed a quick meal while working or traveling. Feasts versus quick meals. Even in noble households, some dishes were made specifically to be portable within the estate. Small pies, meatballs, or pastries that could be served quickly to guests or workers. In this sense, the idea of fast food existed as a necessity, although it was vastly different from our modern version in terms of speed, ingredients, and preparation. In summary, medieval society had its own versions of fast, convenient food. While not as industrialized or standardized as today, meat pies, flatbreads, pottages, and dried foods provided practical, quick meals for peasants, travelers, and even nobles. These foods were the foundation for many portable and convenient dishes we enjoy in modern times. Festivals and banquets. In the medieval era, festivals and banquets were the highlight of medieval life, especially for the wealthy. While peasants celebrated local fairs and religious holidays with simpler foods, nobles and royals turned meals into grand spectacles that showcased wealth, power, and sophistication. Peasant festivals. Peasants had access to more food than usual during festivals or holy days. Common celebratory foods included extra meat, such as pork, chicken, or occasionally hunted game. Pies and pastries made with local ingredients, ale, mead, or small amounts of wine. These meals were communal, with families and neighbors gathering to eat, drink, and celebrate together. Festivals often coincided with harvest time or religious holidays, making them a welcome break from the regular monotonous diet. Noble banquets. For the nobility, banquets were events of luxury and display. A banquet could last several hours and consist of multiple courses. 1. Appetizers and soups, pottages or soups flavored with spices and herbs. 2. Roasted meats, venison, boar, swan, and peacock were common, often garnished elaborately. 3. Fish courses, especially on fasting days when meat was forbidden. 4. Pastries and pies filled with meat, cheese, or sweet fillings. 5. Desserts and fruits, fresh or dried fruits, honey-sweetened cakes, and pastries. Banquets were also highly ceremonial. Servants presented dishes with fanfare, musicians played, and guests were entertained by jesters, acrobats, or minstrels. The use of exotic spices, rare ingredients, and elaborate table decorations emphasized the host's wealth and social position. Seasonal and religious influence. Many feasts aligned with the Christian calendar, such as Christmas, Easter, and Saints' Days. These occasions required specific foods, including fish for fasting days and lamb or veal for celebrations. Seasonal availability also influenced the menu, with fresh fruits in summer and preserved or dried foods in winter. Community and social importance. Beyond food, festivals and banquets strengthened social bonds. Peasant gatherings reinforced community ties, while noble feasts asserted political alliances and hierarchies. Food became a tool for communication, prestige, and even diplomacy. In short, festivals and banquets represented the most elaborate expression of medieval food culture, showing the contrast between everyday survival meals and occasions of excess, pageantry, and social importance. Medieval food versus modern fast food. Medieval food and modern fast food might seem worlds apart, but studying the past reveals some interesting parallels. In the Middle Ages, the type of food people ate depended on social class, geography, and available resources. Just as today, diet is shaped by income, location, and lifestyle. Class and accessibility. In medieval times, peasants relied on simple, filling foods like bread, pottage, and occasional meat. The wealthy enjoyed exotic spices, multiple courses, and elaborate feasts. Similarly, in the modern world, fast food provides affordable, convenient meals for busy or low-income populations, while gourmet fast food, or high-end, ready-to-eat meals, cater to wealthier consumers. Portable and quick meals. The concept of fast food existed even in medieval society. Meat pies, flatbreads, and dried foods allowed people to eat on the go. Travelers, soldiers, and laborers could have a meal without sitting at a table. Modern fast food serves the same purpose, with burgers, sandwiches, and pizzas designed for convenience, portability, and speed. Preservation and safety. Medieval preservation methods like salting, smoking, drying, and pickling ensured food lasted longer and was safe to eat. Today, refrigeration, packaging, and preservatives perform a similar role, though technology has dramatically increased shelf life and safety. Cultural and social significance. Food in the Middle Ages was not just about sustenance. It reflected status, tradition, and religious observance. Festivals and banquets displayed wealth and power, while everyday meals reinforced community and survival. Modern fast food, while often seen as casual, also carries cultural meaning, shared experiences, convenience for busy lifestyles, and even indulgence or status for gourmet items. Final thoughts. By examining medieval food, we see the roots of many modern eating habits. The need for portable meals, the use of spices to enhance flavor, and the social significance of food have persisted through the centuries. While pizza, burgers, and hot dogs are inventions of a later era, the underlying principles of convenience, taste, and social function can be traced back to medieval times. In conclusion, understanding medieval food culture not only teaches us about history, but also helps us appreciate the evolution of eating. Habits that ultimately led to the modern fast food industry. The past and present, though separated by centuries, share common